We're going to continue our exploration of Swift macros and this time create a declaration macro. I've talked before about my programming methodology, HDD. That's hate-driven development, and that's where I see code that I hate, and that's what I try to fix. As we explore macros, you might have gotten the feeling that macros are often the answer. You should temper that. Macros are sometimes the answer. In fact, rule 1 of macros is if you can avoid using a macro, you should do so. So let's get back to what I hate. So imagine we're creating a simple SwiftUI view. So we need to import SwiftUI. We create a view, it has a body, and the body does nothing more than display an image using a system name. So we're passing in an SF symbol using the name as a string. And in this case, there is no SF symbol named checkbox. I made this mistake in front of a workshop recently. And there's no way for the compiler to warn me that I've made a mistake. So in general, we hate strings used as identifiers. So let's see if we can fix that. If I change checkbox to checkmark, this code now works and we see the checkmark on the screen, but again, we're using a string identifier. So let's imagine a macro that creates enums with cases derived from these strings. So I might have a macro named SF symbol, and if I pass it in string circle and arrow.right, I'd like this to expand into an enum named SF symbols, and circle becomes the case circle, and just to make this easier to code, I'll specify that the string is circle, and arrow.right will expand to the case arrow right, and there's the string arrow.right. And notice also that arrow.right, the actual case, is camel cased without the dot. It's arrow uppercase R right. Also how this convenience computed property, which allows me to ask for the name and get back the raw value. So this time, this is what we're going to accomplish. Next time, we'll only create valid SF symbols, so you'll know at coding time if you've used a string that isn't quite right. And actually, to be clear, I'm just going to sketch out how we would accomplish this time. This is an example from my workshop, and it's going to be in my book, so this is just a quick sketch of what it does. We're going to create a declaration macro. We haven't seen that yet. A declaration macro is another example of a freestanding macro. Here it is, it's declaration. And because we're defining the enum named SF symbol, we'll specify the names are named SF symbol. Here's the signature of how we'll call the macro. It accepts a variadic list of strings, and it's an external macro, and here's where we implement it. So let's look at the implementation, and as I mentioned, this is just an outline of the implementation. So here's SF symbols macro. It's a declaration macro. And here's the signature of expansion for a declaration macro. In particular, note that it returns an array of decal syntax. So we're going to return an array of something. We can use a string builder to create our enum SF symbol and include the name computed property as well. The hard part is going to be to add the cases. And to do that, we're going to have to parse the input. So as we've done before, let's guardlet the argument from the node's argument list and check that it's a labeled expression list syntax. We should also check that there's at least one argument. If either of these fails, we'll throw a fatal error. There are no cases. If we're successful, let's go ahead and compute the cases. So let's extract the cases from the argument. So for cases, we start with argument. We look at all the children that happen to be labeled expression syntax. We extract the expression from these, and we verify that these are string literal expression syntax. And from these, we extract the actual string. Once we have the string, I have a helper method called enum cases for, and what it does is it takes circle and returns case circle equals the string circle. And it takes arrow.right, and it turns it into the case that is correctly camel cased, and the string is arrow.right. Once I have all the cases, I'll do a reduce on this, so I have all of the cases on their own line. And that's how this SF symbol with the circle gives me the case circle, and arrow.right gives me the case arrow right, each on their own line. That's just a quick look at our declaration macro. Next time, if we enter something that isn't correct, like just plain nonsense, instead of getting a case that's just plain nonsense, what we want to have happened is that we're warned that this isn't a valid SF symbol name.